So yeah, so I'm going to talk about a different approach from the traditional physiological one that Andy very eloquently described, which is an approach that starts with psychology and then delves into biology, or physiology, neurophysiology. So the model I'm going to describe applies basically to every endurance sport, from 75 seconds up to several hours, even several days for obviously the Tour de France, so these ultra endurance runs. And we counted only the Summer Olympic Games, 70 events that fit the definition. I'm going to, because there's not much time, I'm going to concentrate today on time to exhaustion test, which is one of the basic tests of endurance that we use in the lab. But a lot of people have criticized this test for not being, because there's no pacing. Basically, for the people that I'm sure most of you know, but basically you fix, for example, in this case, a power output, and then you ask the athlete to cycle or run or row, whatever, for as long as they can. This is a professional cyclist I used to work with in Medway. Quite impressive. But a lot of people think it's not really relevant to competition, and I would argue that actually they are extremely relevant to competition, because especially doing head-to-head competitions, apart from the best athlete in the field, for all the others, basically the race is a time to exhaustion test. So this is the Beijing 2008 10K. So the bold line is the winner. And as you can see, as also Andy showed earlier, at this stage, these athletes gave up. They couldn't keep up the speed that would have put them in a chance to win. Here, and of course here. I'm not talking about the difference, obviously, between winning a medal or not. So actually, I think time to exhaustion test is a very valid, ecologically valid test of endurance. So, but the basic question, which has been a basic question in physiology for decades, is, okay, why these people could maintain the pace dictated by the winner and have a chance to win? And the traditional answer is muscle fatigue, going back to A.V. Hill in the early 20th century, where he said stoppage or exhaustion is due to basically insufficient oxygen delivery and therefore building up of lactic acid in the muscles. And over the years, we added a variety of mechanisms, like, for example, glycogen depletion, affecting the muscle, other metabolites apart from lactic acid. We also added, we now know that the part of the muscle fatigue that we observe actually is not occurring within the muscle itself, but occurring within the central nervous system. That's called central fatigue. And we know a variety of factors that contribute to that. But at the very basic part of this physiological model, the assumption is that this reduction in the ability to produce power induced by peripheral and central fatigue directly limits performance. And this is representing this graph here. So here is the exercise required by the time to exhaustion test, so it could be the pace of the leader in the race. And these central and peripheral processes will reduce the maximal power output that the person can produce till the point that the actual maximal power output corresponds to the power required by the exercise, and therefore you will stop. However, when I went in the literature to see for the actual data, because this is just a graph made up by the author, it wasn't based on it, it's a theoretical graph. I looked for the actual data and I couldn't find, so I did a study myself, and this is what came out. So there was a significant decline in maximum power output using a mini winged test. This was a 6-second winged test, but with the same protocol, so high load. And this is the power output required by the time to exhaustion test. And as you can see, just a few seconds after exhaustion, just the time to basically accelerate, there was a significant increase, there was a significant difference in power output. So even immediately after exhaustion, they were able to produce way more power. There were some critiques in terms of not fixing the cadence, but now these findings have been replicated also when the cadence has been fixed at 70 RPM. This is actually a VO2 max test. This is the power of one leg. As you can see, immediately after the VO2 max test, the subjects were able to produce for a few seconds by significantly higher maximal power. Also, quite interesting data. Can you see the whole slide, or is it like cut? I don't know. Okay. They use occlusion, which is quite, and biopsies to actually measure the amount of ATP left in the muscle at exhaustion after a VO2 max test. And they calculated that with the ATP left in the muscle, these people theoretically could have cycled at 100% of VO2 max, so at the power that when they stopped, basically, the VO2 max test, for another 7 to 8 minutes, which is, you definitely don't feel like that at the end of VO2 max test. The people that have done it know very well. But actually, in a way, there is also like another popular model, in alternative to the traditional physiological one, which is the central governor model. Basically, in very short summary, the idea is that there is in the brain a subconscious intelligence system that calculates for how long you can exercise without damaging your homeostasis. And therefore, when you reach the point that if you went further, you would kill yourself or threaten your health with exercise, it will stop you by regulating locomotor muscle recruitment. And I have many issues with this model, but the main one is that actually you don't need this construct of a central governor to explain performance. You can explain it just using standard psychological theories and neurophysiology, like I'll show you in a minute. From now on, basically, I will explain, hopefully I'll convince you that I can explain performance, and I will never mention the central governor, because basically it's not needed at all. Also, both the traditional model and also the central governor model, in a way, the biggest challenge is this, is that they cannot explain what we can observe. Coaches observe it all the time in the field, but you can also observe it in the laboratory. They cannot explain the effects of psychological factors on performance, on endurance performance. This is an historical study. 1968 was when I was born. And as you can see, they compare the time to exhaustion, 2 time to exhaustion done on your own, and 1 time to exhaustion where the 2 subjects kind of competed with each other. And in the competition condition, which they assume as increased motivation, there was a significantly higher time to exhaustion. This is a challenge for both the muscle fatigue model and also the central governor model, because we know very well that in extremely motivated people, in certain conditions, you can actually exercise to the point that you get ill with heat illness or even die. So clearly, if there is a central governor, it's not working very well. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to actually use, as I said, integrate what we know about exercise physiology with standard mainstream psychology, and also, because I'm a physiologist, I'm interested in also the neurophysiology, they also use techniques from cognitive neuroscience. So the basic principle of this model, which I call psychobiological for a very important reason, are, first of all, that I look at endurance tests like a time to exhaustion test, but up to a competition as a goal-directed behavior. So the science that studies behavior is psychology. So if it's a behavior, you should be able to explain it using psychological theories and constructs, and this is what I call the psychological level of explanation. So first we explain behavior with psychology, and then, and this is at a lower level of explanation, you try to understand, using cognitive neuroscience, what are the kind of the biological aspects of the psychological constructs that determine performance. So we start with the psychological level of explanation, and the number of the main psychological constants that you need depend on the complexity of the task. So for time to exhaustion tests, you only need 2 main psychological variables. For time trials, you need additional 3, and for mass start and US competition, you need another one. But today, as I said, I will concentrate on time to exhaustion tests. If you're interested in time trials, I will talk about it in the parallel session after this one. So perception of effort, I think most of you know what it is. You have seen the Borg-RPE scale. It's the conscious sensation of how hard, heavy, and strenuous a physical task is. And we measure with the Borg-RPE scale. I also tried with facial EMG because we have a facial expression of effort. But important, a lot of people think that the RPE scale is a measure of fatigue. Actually, it's not a measure of fatigue, it's a measure of effort. For example, if the lady there tried to lift me, she would probably give me, unless she's extremely strong, she would probably give me a 17, 18. And that's not because she's fatigued, you're not doing anything, so you're not physically fatigued, it's because I eat too much pizza and gelati. I'm too heavy. So perception of effort per se is not a measure of fatigue. The fatigue related to perception of effort is this one, is the progressive increase in perception of effort that occurs over time, even when you keep the pace constant. And we all know that. When you start running, you would have, this is cycling actually, so you would have like a low RPE, and over time it will increase. To the point that we know, usually in highly motivated people, we know that between 18 and 20, exhaustion occurs. But the next challenge is to explain psychologically why people stop when they reach, motivated people reach a high level of perceived exertion. A common psychological explanation is what I call the hedonic theory. So basically, the people stop when exercise and perception of effort and also other sensation becomes too unpleasant. If you ask, most people will tell you that's the reason, psychologists or even physiologists. But if you look at the data, for example, this is a scale that goes from +5 to -5. Negative scores refers to unpleasantness. And as you can see, at the end of the VO2 max test on a treadmill, the average rating is about 2, -2, which means unpleasant, but it's not so unpleasant that a motivated subject would stop because cannot stand the pain or the effort and the fatigue. So we need another theory to explain why. And the one that I've adopted in my model is a general motivation theory. It's called motivation intensity theory from Bremen Self in 1989. And to cut a very long story short, because it has a lot of implications, this theory, basically the theory differentiates between effort exerted, and what is important for me is the perceived effort exerted, and potential motivation, which is the maximal effort that you're willing to exert in order to succeed in the task. So basically, people, when the perceived effort is equivalent to the maximal effort that you're willing to exert, or if you're highly motivated to what you perceive to be your maximal effort, people will so-called withdraw effort, disengage from the task, and give up, basically, in short. And this is exactly what you see in the lab, or also in the field. So when you reach these were highly motivated, you withdraw effort and disengage. So what are the predictions of this model at psychological level? The first prediction is that changes in potential motivation will change performance. So the more you increase the motivation, the longer the time to exhaustion. However, only up to a certain point. Because if you are motivated enough to give a maximal effort, further increase in motivation would not improve performance. And there are many factors that determine potential motivation. One of them, we saw competition. One of them is, for example, is monetary reward. There's actually not much research. This is the only one I could find. And they use this endurance test, which is not dynamic, but it's the closest I could get. And here they did basically, they gave them 20, 50, 1.25 or 3 or 7.8 French francs at that time. This was in per 20 seconds of time to exhaustion. And as you can see, there is an increase in time to exhaustion, the larger the monetary reward. But as predicted by the theory, you can see that the more you give, then the improvement tends to plateau, because you cannot indefinitely increase motivation and by doing so increase performance. You reach a point where you can't because you can't exert more than what you perceive to be a maximal effort. The other prediction is that for the same potential motivation, if you change perception of effort, you will have a change in performance. So if you increase perception of effort, there will be a reduction in performance. If you reduce perception of effort, you have an improvement in performance. And of course, with a lot of physiological manipulations, you have, for example, in hypoxia, your perception of effort increases and your endurance performance is reduced. If I give you hyperoxia, your perception of effort is reduced and your time to exhaustion is increased. But then you will say, okay, Sam, but that's, there are also physiological changes. You can explain this both with the physiological model and the psychological model. However, I'll show you now 2 examples of manipulations or perception of effort that clearly you cannot explain physiologically. The first one is mental fatigue. So mental fatigue is basically fatigue induced by prolonged cognitive activity. And what we did, we did a quite high intensity endurance performance test, 80% of peak power output. But in the experimental condition, this was preceded by 90 minutes of a very demanding cognitive task to mentally fatigued people. We also know which areas of the brain are targeted by this task, which, by the way, are brain areas associated with perception of effort. And what we found was a significant reduction in time to exhaustion, just by playing in front of a computer for 90 minutes, although it's quite fatiguing, but clearly not physiologically. There's no glycogen depletion or VO2 max change here. In fact, we measured a variety of physiological factors, and none of them was changed by the manipulation. The only parameter that changed was perception of effort, which was higher in the mental fatigue condition, and as a result, as predicted by the model, they reached the same level of, because they were highly motivated in both conditions, the same level of motivation, but earlier. And they disengaged earlier, and therefore time to exhaustion was reduced. Israel, what is Israel? In a minute. The other one is using non-conscious manipulation. So these are psychological manipulation, but that the participant is not aware of. And so basically, the participant did the time to exhaustion test, and at the same time, we asked him to do a scanning visual vigilance task, which I don't have time to explain, but that was mainly to make sure that he was looking at the screen. But he didn't know, he thought he was doing a cognitive task to measure brain responses to combination of activities. But in reality, this is what he was seeing. Can you click on the first? So I kind of strip down the task, so you have only the central mask, the fixation point. Can you see anything? Apart from a kind of a Turkish carpet kind of, can you see anything else? Apart from, now the other one. So this is the same thing, but slow down. So in one condition, we showed happy faces, and in another condition, we showed them sad faces. The brain is very sensitive to faces for many reasons, evolutionary, communication, etc. And this was, to be honest, I tried because in cognitive neuroscience it's been used quite a lot, this paradigm, so I want to know if I could affect performance and effort in physical tasks. To be honest, I wasn't that convinced, but it actually worked. And there was a significant difference in terms of exhaustion between the happy and the sad faces, and this was associated with the reduction, with the difference in perception of effort, with the happy faces being lower than the sad faces. We repeated the same paradigm by using words, action versus inaction words. Again, subconsciously, they didn't see the words, okay? Again, the same protocol, and again, we had a significant difference in performance, and this was associated with the difference in perception of effort. So, for the biological explanation, unfortunately I don't have much time in 20 minutes. I'll be very brief, but if you know more, come to the parallel session. There are two main models. One is that perception of effort comes from sensory signal coming from the muscles and also other organs active during exercise, which I'll show you in the parallel session. A lot of people believe that's true, but it's not. And the other one is that the perception of effort comes from a calorie discharge of the central motor command. So what you perceive as effort is actual activity of the premotor and motor areas. You perceive basically how intensely you drive the muscle rather than signals from the muscles, okay, to simplify a lot. But I thought, so come to the parallel session if you want to know more about this. But I thought a lot of students especially are interested in the practical applications. So I'll go again quickly. I will give more details in the parallel session, but through the practical application. First of all, keep training. Okay? A lot of people say, Sam, so it's all in the mind. No. Yeah, but it's all in the mind because I can explain performance with psychological factors. But, for example, training, although it's being studied in terms of, mainly in terms of physiological adaptations, surprise, surprise, one of the main adaptations of training is reducing perception of effort. We all know that the same pace, if you're trained, feels easier than if you're not. And again, that explains the difference in time to exhaustion based on the model. I just look at the same thing, but from a different perspective. So keep training is the best way to reduce perception of effort. However, the model suggests novel and further ways to reduce perception of effort. One of them, because mental fatigue seems to increase perception of effort and reduce performance, basically pay attention to mental fatigue, both before the competition, but also during the competition. For example, a long competition like a marathon, even a marathon is quite cognitively demanding. To pace yourself, fight the urge to quit, or to reduce the speed when the body starts to hurt and fatigue ensues. So it's not only physically demanding, it's mentally demanding. When you do it for half an hour, an hour and a half, that induces mental fatigue during the race. And for example, the pacing strategies that Andy used for the braking 2, although the motivation was primarily for drag and reduce energy cost, might have helped in using the car actually, might have helped because basically the athletes didn't have to pace themselves. The only thing they had to do was to follow the pacing card. Also, and I'll show it later in the parallel session, systematic use of psychological skills. There are some psychological skills that can increase motivation, but they can also reduce perception of effort, like self-taught, for example, and are very effective in improving endurance performance and are underutilized in endurance athletes. The other one is testing. So there's been a lot of physiological testing, but we know, for example, that in terms of predicting or diagnosing overtraining, the best ones are still subjective. So things like session RP, how hard it is during training, or the mood and stress recovery personnel. So use subjective measures as well as objective ones during training. And hopefully in the future now, EEG to measure brain activity is becoming cheaper and cheaper. I mean, this set costs $200. The problem is the analysis and the quality of the data, but we are getting there. So I think in the future we may have objective parameters. Nutrition, so there are nutrients like caffeine, that also tyrosine, it seems in the heat, that can have an effect on caffeine on brain adenosine, tyrosine on dopamine, so that you can modulate brain activity basically with nutrition. So that's, I think, interesting for the future to study more nutrients that can do that. And this is something that I'll show in the parallel session. Basically, we have developed and tested a new form of endurance training, which basically adds cognitive load in this way with the computer to normal endurance training in order to enhance the load on the brain and therefore enhance adaptations and performance. And unfortunately, like everything, like the traditional model which led to the development of blood doping and other things, mainly blood doping, also a brain perspective can lead to doping, such as amphetamines, already used, modafinil, which is a psychostimulant, and also brain stimulation with transcranial direct current stimulation in the future may be considered doping. So, and also application in health, like cancer-related fatigue in the military. Thanks to all my collaborators and the organizer again. Thank you very much.
Yeah.